Hey everyone, friends! Welcome to Uncle Bo's Scary Stories channel, and today's topic is the tragedy of the Dyatlov group. Many films have been made and countless articles written on this subject. I had to do a lot of translation work to understand all the details of the case. So, let's dive in. Two men are walking through a snowy pass. In the distance, the mountain of Otorten looms. This is the northern Urals. The biting wind, dark clouds, cold and bleak landscape. February here is harsh. These two men are students from the Ural Polytechnic University. They're in the mountains searching for their friends who went missing about 10 days ago. Suddenly the searchers spot a dark patch in the snow. Upon closer inspection, they recognize the missing tent from several days ago. Inside there's no one, only abandoned belongings. The students start shouting, hoping their friends are nearby, but no one will hear their cries. A little later, they will find the bodies of 9 frozen members of the Dyatlov group. Strange injuries will be found on their bodies. Some will be missing their eyes and one even their tongue. Many of the victims are nearly naked, which is incredibly strange for hikers on a winter expedition. The group's tent will also show peculiar cuts. The circumstances of the incident have raised numerous questions, many of which remain unanswered to this day. What caused 9 young, healthy people to suddenly abandon their tent in the middle of the night and flee down the mountainside, almost barefoot and unclothed? What really happened to the Dyatlov group? January 23rd, 1959. A dorm room at Ural Polytechnic Institute. There are still a few weeks left before the start of the new term after the winter break. However, one of the rooms is bustling with activity. A group of students and recent graduates, all in their early 20s, are packing food, gear and medical supplies. Everything they might need for a challenging trek through the Ural Mountains. Overseeing the preparations is the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov. He is 23, lean, strong and confident. According to Dyatlov's hiking mentor, everyone wanted to go on hikes with him, but not everyone got the chance. At the same time, some hikers who knew Dyatlov admitted that he could sometimes be too strict and demanding of the group. But there was no doubt about Igor's qualifications. By 1959, he had already led over a dozen expeditions, many as the group leader. Dyatlov, the son of engineers and a student of the radio engineering faculty, had built his own shortwave radio receiver, despite it being technically prohibited. He had used it on several previous hikes. However, on this trip, Dyatlov would leave the device behind. The upcoming trek was classified as a Category 3 difficulty, the highest. The hikers planned to cover at least 300 kilometers in just over 2 weeks, factoring in the amount of provisions for such a demanding route. The heavy radio was not an obvious choice for this journey, although in retrospect it might have saved their lives. In the dorm room there are 2 girls, Zinaida Kolmogorova and Lyudmila Dubinina. Both are young students at Ural Polytechnic. At just 20, Dubinina is the youngest member of the group, yet despite her age, both girls have several expeditions under their belts. The young man carefully packing the first aid kit is Yuri Yudin, 21, also a student at the university. Despite his frail health and constant back and knee problems, Yudin had participated in many hikes, believing they actually helped improve his condition. However, his illness would cause him to leave the route almost at the very beginning, ultimately saving his life. Another radio engineering student alongside Dyatlov and Kolmogorova is Yuri Doroshenko, a brave guy who during a previous expedition scared off a bear by waving a hammer. Yuri Krivonishenko is the group's main prankster and musician, a recent graduate of Ural Polytechnic who now works as a foreman in the closed city of Chelyabinsk-40. Krivonishenko had also been involved in the cleanup of the infamous Kishtim disaster, one of the first nuclear accidents in the Soviet Union. At 24, Alexander Kolevatov, a fellow student, is the oldest in the group. Quiet and introverted, he kept a diary that he hid from his companions and smoked an old-fashioned pipe. Rustem Slobodin was a key figure in the Dyatlov group, the son of a professor, which in Soviet times signified prestige. Rustem was a university graduate and an engineer at a closed facility. Finally, the ninth person in the dorm room is Nikolai Thibault Brignol. His eccentric last name came from his great-grandfather, who had emigrated to the Russian Empire. Nikolai had graduated from a technical school a year prior and worked as an engineer. Once the preparations are complete, all 9 set out for the train station. There they are joined by the 10th member of the group. He stands out. Semyon Zolotaryov, 37, nearly twice the age of the others. Zolotaryov wasn't just an experienced hiker, but an instructor at a local tourist base. He was supposed to go on an expedition earlier with another group, but had to cancel for personal reasons and asked to join Dyatlov's team. Dyatlov figured Zolotaryov's experience would be a great asset to the group. Zolotaryov was perhaps the most intriguing member of the group. Many theories about the tragedy would later focus on him as a key figure. Why? We'll discuss that later. For now, let's just note his distinctive moustache and the fact that he asked people to call him Sasha, despite having a tattoo that said Jaina, and that wasn't his only tattoo. For the Soviet Union of that time, tattoos were quite unusual, although Zolotaryov was a war veteran, and among them, tattoos weren't so rare. Many of the participants kept journals throughout the expedition. In addition, the group carried several cameras. These were necessary for later reports to the university's sports club, but the hikers also used them to document everyday moments of the journey. The film found during the search would later reveal much about the course of the expedition, and possibly about the reasons behind their deaths. At this point, it's important to add a little historical context for a better understanding of the situation. I'm sure that some of you watching this video may have never lived in the USSR. Well, in the late 1950s, the Dyatlov group wasn't unique in their love for hiking. In fact, hiking and trekking were at their peak popularity. It was an important part of the thaw era, a time when hikes, tents, guitars, campfire songs, and a sense of relative freedom defined a whole generation of Soviet people. The Dyatlov group wasn't the only hiking group at their institute. Ural Polytechnic was one of the best universities in the country, which speaks volumes about the participants. Their diaries and the memories of friends reveal that these were smart, creative, well-rounded individuals. Despite their technical education, they wrote poems, composed songs, took an interest in photography, and of course loved the outdoors. On January 26, 1959, a few days after departing from Sverdlovsk, the group arrived by truck at the settlement near the 41st district, close to the town of Ivdel. This marked the end of the civilized world. This area was notorious for the Ivdelag, a labor camp built in the 1930s as part of the Gulag system. Many people in the region had ties to the camp system, both former prisoners and guards. The previous few days of their journey, when the group had traveled mostly by trains and buses, had passed without incident, filled with songs and conversation. However, there were a couple of noteworthy incidents. In the town of Serov, the group wasn't allowed to stay overnight at the local train station. The group's prankster, Yuri Krivonishenko, quickly put on a little show. He took off his hat, started begging for money, and sang a song. His performance ended with a trip to the local police station. Another incident with the police occurred on the train from Serov when a drunk man harassed the group. Both situations were resolved without serious consequences for the hikers. They had official orders for their trip, and the expedition was formally associated with the upcoming CPSU Congress, which likely helped smooth over misunderstandings with the police. These episodes would later play an important role in one of the more popular theories regarding the tragedy. On January 27th, the group reached the village of Severny. Here they said goodbye to Yuri Yudin. He had been feeling pain in his legs and back for several days, hoping it would pass. But on January 28th, it became clear that Yudin couldn't continue. The 9 remaining Dyatlov members continued their journey along the Lozva River, while Yudin returned to the 41st district. This is a key moment for the investigation. From this point on, no one else would witness the group's journey, or at least no one who was willing to come forward. According to Dyatlov's plan, the group was to hike across the northern Urals and reach Mount Otorten. From there, they were supposed to turn back and arrive at the village of Vizhai by February 12th to send a telegram confirming their return to the university. When parting with Yudin, Dyatlov asked him to inform the sports club that their return might be delayed due to heavy snowfall in the area, as other expeditions they'd encountered had warned them. Dyatlov's assumption about a possible delay seemed logical. However, neither on February 12th nor on the 14th, nor on the 16th did the Ural Polytechnic receive any telegram from the Dyatlov group. By mid-February 1959, most students had returned to their studies, including those who had gone on their own expeditions during the break. Despite the group's absence, by February 16th, almost no one at the university's sports club was worried about the Dyatlov group. Delays in winter expeditions were not uncommon. Even Yuri Yudin back at school was not overly concerned. He was surprised to hear that the group hadn't returned yet, but didn't raise any alarms with the university or the sports club. Perhaps this was due to a slight sense of guilt. Yudin hadn't passed on Dyatlov's message about a possible delay, thinking that the group would show up soon and no one would notice his oversight. By February 17th, only the relatives of a few group members were seriously concerned. Dyatlov's sister, Slobodin's father, and the families of Dubinina and Kolevatov had been persistently calling the sports club and university officials for several days, asking questions. All they received were standard responses about delays and refusals to send a search plane. Finally, officials at the Polytechnic sent a telegram to the village of Vizhai. The reply came back that the Dyatlov group had not returned. The official search operation began only on February 20th. The first problem searchers encountered was the lack of a precise route for the Dyatlov group. According to regulations, the university's sports club should have had the route for every team, but no one had the Dyatlov group's plan. Eventually, they managed to piece it together thanks to luck. Some group members had described their route to friends in detail, and these friends helped reconstruct the plan for the search team. The first searchers to set out were not emergency services, which didn't exist in their current form at the time, nor the military or police, but a few amateur hiking groups from Sverdlovsk. An Un-2 plane was sent to fly over the presumed route of the Dyatlov group. Searchers hoped to spot either the hikers themselves or signs left by them. Meanwhile, representatives of the university's sports club arrived by helicopter at points where the group was supposed to have stopped, as well as in small settlements of the local Mansi people. Only a few thousand people lived in the region, and in one settlement, the headman mentioned that a group of tourists had visited them a couple of weeks prior. Their stay had been brief. They had tea, didn't stay the night, and continued on their way. The first few days of the search yielded no results. Despite constant aerial surveys and ground efforts, no trace of the hikers could be found. Gradually, information about the missing group reached regional authorities, which led to the military joining the search, including dog handlers with search dogs. Some of the most experienced hiking experts, not only from the region but from across the Soviet Union, were now involved. Even the local Mansi people, who knew the area well, agreed to help with the search. At this point in the search, almost 10 days after the group should have returned to Vijay and sent a telegram, no one was seriously considering the possibility of a tragedy. Yes, an official case had been opened regarding the group's disappearance, and a local prosecutor had been assigned, but this was mostly a formality. One of the leading hiking experts from Sverdlovsk, Evgeny Maslenikov, who was also part of the search, stated that while Dyatlov's route was difficult, the group was experienced and well prepared, so they should be able to handle it. Maslenikov speculated that perhaps one of the hikers had been injured, or that the group had come down with an illness, which could explain the significant delay. The searchers decided to drop a group of tourists at Mount Otorten, the final destination of Dyatlov's planned route. If so, the plan was to follow their route. The group, led by Boris Slabtsov, a key figure in one of the most well-known theories about the Dyatlov group's demise, was dropped off near Otorten. Ground searchers communicated with the aircrew using signals, with hikers arranging their bodies into shapes to report their findings to the search plane. On February 25th, the first breakthrough occurred. Slabtsov's group found a barely visible ski trail. There was speculation that it might belong to the Dyatlov group. This happened in the Ospia River Valley. The team followed the trail, deciding to split up, since it wasn't clear which direction the Dyatlov group had gone. Slabtsov and his companions discovered a campsite, likely belonging to the missing group, but they couldn't determine how old it was. On February 26th, several skiers reached the pass near Mount Kholat Syakhl and spotted a black dot in the snow. Slabtsov's heart raced. The searchers ran to the site and found a tent. Without hesitation, Slabtsov recognized it as the Dyatlov group's tent, as he had helped make it. The tent was sewn from two smaller ones. Nearby, skis stood in the snow, and there was an ice axe at the entrance. A jacket belonging to one of the group members lay on the snow. Part of the tent was buried under about 20 centimeters of snow, suggesting it wasn't an avalanche. The snow seemed to have been blown by the wind. The buttons at the entrance were undone, and inside there were no signs of life. No bodies, alive or dead. For the searchers, this was encouraging. Perhaps their comrades were still alive. The news of the tent's discovery quickly spread among the other search groups. After the discovery of the bodies, Evgeny Maslenikov put forward the first theory. The group might have been blown down the slope by a stormy wind. However, when Maslenikov sent a telegram with this theory, his colleagues asked a logical question. If the wind had been that strong, why did the tent and its contents remain in place? On March 1st, a more experienced prosecutor, Lev Ivanov, took over the case. His main task was to investigate the scene and continue searching for the remaining members of the group. The searchers kept probing the slope with long poles, trying to find bodies under the snow, but these efforts were fruitless, and even metal detectors were of little use beneath the thick snow layers. Upon arriving at the scene, Ivanov carefully examined the tent's condition after the chaotic inspection by non-professionals. He concluded that the tent's location had been poorly chosen due to the strong winds, yet it had been set up securely. In one of his early radio messages, Ivanov also proposed the storm wind theory. Considering that traces of meal preparation were found in the tent, most of the outer clothing had been left inside, and human urine was discovered near the tent. The prosecutor began to form a picture. While the group was preparing dinner and changing clothes, someone went outside to relieve themselves and was blown away by the wind. Hearing cries for help, the others ran out of the tent, barely dressed, only to be swept down the slope as well. Some tried to light a fire by the cedar, while others possibly attempted to return to the tent, but were unable to, and froze to death along the way. Those at the bottom of the slope also perished from hypothermia, as they had no clothes or food. However, this theory didn't explain why the tent remained intact, how to account for the cuts on its sides, and most importantly, the storm theory was later disproved by the investigation. Although this preliminary conclusion was flawed, some details were logical. The fact that the bodies were found without clothing suggested that something serious occurred while they were undressing, serious enough to force them to flee down the slope toward the Lozva River Valley. Soon, the hiking expert Evgeny Maslenikov proposed a new theory. In his opinion, the danger could have been what witnesses described as a fireball. This ball was supposedly seen in the region on February 1st and February 17th. In the second instance, it was observed by a hiking group led by Carolyn. The group members recalled being awakened early in the morning on February 17th by the shouts of their companions who were cooking breakfast outside. The hikers rushed out of the tent, barely dressed, and saw a huge glowing ball in the sky, growing larger and larger. According to one of them, it was something much bigger than a meteorite. It seemed like it was about to collide with the Earth. The group watched the ball move across the sky for about a minute before it disappeared. The last entry in the Dyatlov group's diary was dated January 31st. Considering reports that a similar ball had been seen not only on February 17th, but also on February 1st, Maslenikov began to wonder, could this have been the reason that caused the Dyatlov group to abandon everything and flee down the slope, almost unclothed? There is another interesting fact connected to Carolyn's group. Shortly before the fireball incident, they had stopped for tea in a Mansi village. The head of this village later told the Dyatlov searchers that the Dyatlov group had also stopped by for tea. However, the Dyatlov group had not visited the Mansi. The village head had confused them with Carolyn's group. The indigenous Mansi people played a significant role in the Dyatlov group's disappearance theories. One theory suggested that the students might have somehow offended a sacred Mansi site or insulted the people, leading to an attack. However, we'll return to that theory later. Meanwhile, on March 2nd, with the help of the Mansi, the Dyatlov group's cache was found. But its contents were untouched and provided no important clues. 3 days later, about a kilometre from the tent, another body was discovered, Rustem Slobodin. He was relatively better dressed than the others, wearing a shirt, sweater, long underwear and pants. One of his feet was in a felt boot, and he had a ski cap on his head. This fact again cast doubt on the storm wind theory. How could the cap remain if the wind had been so strong? Slobodin was found face down. A small depression in the snow under his face indicated that he had still been breathing when he collapsed. But the most interesting part was that Slobodin had a mark on his head, as if he had been struck with a blunt object. Meanwhile, the investigation into the tent revealed new findings. Some of the cuts had been made by the searchers on the first day, but many smaller slashes on the other side had not. An expert seamstress was brought in, and she confidently stated that the cuts were made with a knife intentionally. This meant that someone had tried to cut their way out of the tent that fateful night. Moreover, the examination confirmed that the cuts had been made from the inside, not the outside. This indicated that the Dyatlov group had, in a panic, cut open the tent to make an emergency escape without taking the time to open the entrance. The results of the medical examination were also ready. According to the autopsy, the cause of death for all 5 recovered hikers was hypothermia. This wasn't particularly surprising to the investigation, although it didn't explain Slobodin's head injury, which was unlikely to have been caused by a simple fall. But the most important questions, what caused the tragedy and what happened to the remaining 4 hikers, remained unanswered. As the investigation continued, the families of the deceased prepared for funerals. To their surprise, the authorities strongly recommended holding the funerals in the mountains or other remote areas. This request seemed extremely strange, given that all the deceased had studied and lived in Sverdlovsk. Only after persistent protests from the families were they allowed to hold the funerals in the city. According to Yuri Yudin, the authorities were trying to cover up the story as much as possible and pretend that nothing had happened. However, news of the missing group and the recovered bodies spread quickly through Sverdlovsk, and many people came to say goodbye to the group members. By some accounts, more than 1,000 people. Of the 5 found, 4 were buried in the same city cemetery, while Yuri Krivonishenko was buried in a different one. His father was the one who mentioned the sighting of the fireball on February 1st. He had heard about it from 2 hikers who attended his son's funeral. They described roughly the same thing as Karlin's group had about the incident on February 17th. News of the mysterious fireball, which had been seen several times in February, reached prosecutor Ivanov. The fact that multiple independent sources had reported it lent credibility to the story. It couldn't be dismissed as a fabrication or mistake. Investigators found 3 cameras in the Dyatlov group's tent. After developing the films, the photos revealed what one might expect from a typical hike: nature, conversations, hikers on skis, hikers at rest. But as the film neared its end, it became harder to look at the photos, not because of their content, but because of the realization that the people in the images were walking toward their deaths. The last photo on Krivonishenko's camera drew the investigators' attention for a different reason. It was a dark image with a bright light in the distance, out of focus. Immediately, the stories about the fireball came to mind. High-ranking Communist Party officials strongly urged Ivanov not to mention the connection between the fireballs and the Dyatlov group's death. We'll discuss the reasons for this later. While Ivanov continued his investigation, searchers tried to find the bodies of the remaining 4 hikers near the tent. March and April passed with no results, but in early May, as the snow began to melt, something unexpected was discovered. First, some small broken branches of fir and cedar were found, not scattered randomly but forming a trail leading to a ravine. This discovery was made by one of the Mansi hunters. Following the trail, he found frozen pants, or rather a pant leg, as if it had been roughly cut off. Searchers who arrived at the scene found a piece of a sweater nearby, and later that day they uncovered a body. It was lying in a stream under 4 meters of snow. The body was wearing a shirt, 2 sweaters and pants. One foot had a sock, and the other was wrapped in part of a sweater. It was later identified as Lyudmila Dubinina's body. Further digging in the same area revealed 3 more bodies lying close together, as if the friends had tried to keep each other warm in their final moments. These were the bodies of Zolotaryov, Kolevatov and Thibaut Brignol. The bodies, due to partial contact with water, showed signs of decomposition. However, Even this didn't explain why some of the bodies were missing their eyes and why Dubinina's tongue was gone. Near the bodies, searchers found a makeshift platform of pine branches. The most interesting aspect of these newly found bodies emerged after autopsies and forensic analysis. According to the reports, Kolevatov had died from hypothermia, like the first 5 hikers. However, Dubinina, Zolotaryov and Thibaut Brignol had died from injuries caused by a great force. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had multiple broken ribs, while Thibaut Brignol had a fractured skull. According to the expert, the injuries were so severe that death would have been instantaneous. The phrase, "a great force," remains vague. Such injuries were unlikely to have been caused by a fall. Moreover, no large rocks were found on the slope that could have caused such injuries. In May, the Dyatlov group's funerals were held. The relatives of the deceased insisted on open caskets, but prosecutor Ivanov ordered the funerals to be conducted with closed caskets. Ivanov explained that the bodies had suffered significant decomposition. According to him, he allowed only Lyudmila Dubinina's father to view his daughter's body, and the man fainted upon seeing it. After the funerals, the prosecutor's office closed the case with the ambiguous statement that the group's death had been caused by an overwhelming natural force. The investigation had failed to find definitive evidence supporting any specific theory. The case was classified, later declassified, and left in the archives of the Sverdlovsk region. Thus, this story became a mystery that has baffled people for over half a century. Now let's take a look at the existing theories and try to determine which might be the most plausible. Over the last 50 years, many theories have emerged, but they can be categorized into 4 main groups: natural factors, avalanches, storms, and other natural phenomena; technological causes, secret weapon tests, radiation exposure, and so on; criminal theories, attacks by the Mansi, escaped convicts, foreign spies; anomalous theories, UFOs, infrasound, and similar phenomena. In conclusion, the tragedy of the Dyatlov group has remained one of the most mysterious and unsettling incidents in modern history. Despite extensive investigations, the exact cause of the hikers' deaths remains shrouded in ambiguity. Over the years, many theories have been proposed to explain what really happened that fateful night in February 1959. From natural disasters to potential technological mishaps, criminal foul play, or even the influence of unknown forces, the case has intrigued and haunted those who seek the truth. In the next part, we will explore the various theories in detail, delving into the natural, technological, criminal, and anomalous possibilities that may shed light on the tragic events that unfolded on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. Stay tuned as we continue our investigation into this chilling mystery. Be sure to subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories about what might be going on with the Dyatlov group and whether you're interested in such stories. And don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends.